disobeying or talking back to adults. And this can include people like their parents or teachers. And when this behavior lasts longer than 6 months and goes beyond what is usual for the age as well as developmental level, it might suggest that the child does have ODD. And so this behavior often disrupts the child's normal daily functioning, including relationships and activities within the family and at school. So what are some of the symptoms that we are often seeing? So having frequent temper tantrums, arguing fairly often with adults, refusing to do what's asked of them, continually questioning rules and then refusing to follow them, doing things to annoy or upset others, including adults, blaming others for their own misbehaviors or mistakes, being easily annoyed, often having an angry attitude, speaking harshly or unkindly, seeking revenge or being vindictive. Now, in children and teens with ODD, these symptoms happen more often than what, like we talked about, kind of occasionally occurs as they're developing. And so the symptoms are going to be interfering with things like learning and school adjustment. They may disrupt the child or teen's ability to have relationships with other people. And so to get a diagnosis of ODD, certain criteria has to be met. And this is based on the DSM-5-TR. DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Currently in its 5th edition, the text revision. The original came out in the 1950s. And so it's created by the American Psychiatric Association. And what you will find here is all of the identified mental disorders, information about each of them, including this diagnostic criteria. And so this is a criteria that professionals are using to make a diagnosis, so that way the same information is being used for a diagnosis across the board. Now, we don't have to have met all this diagnostic criteria to seek out treatment, though. So you don't have to wait when we're talking about any kind of mental disorder. If you're having symptoms, maybe you're not meeting the diagnostic criteria, but you have symptoms that are disruptive, or your child does, you absolutely can start to seek out treatment. You don't have to wait until all of this is met to go get help. But with that said, here is the diagnostic criteria for ODD. So a pattern of angry, irritable mood, argumentative or defiant behavior or vindictiveness lasting at least 6 months, as evidenced by at least 4 symptoms from any of the following categories, and exhibited during interaction with at least one person who is not a sibling. Right, so what we need to see are these patterns for at least 6 months. We need to see 4 symptoms of it, and it needs to be seen during interactions with someone other than a sibling. So 4 of these symptoms for 6 months with someone other than a sibling. Often loses their temper, often touchy or easily annoyed, often angry and resentful, often argues with authority figures, often actively refuses to comply with requests or with rules, often deliberately annoys others, often blames others for their mistakes or misbehavior, has been spiteful or vindictive at least twice during the past 6 months. So the persistence and the frequency of these behaviors needs to be distinguished, or is used to kind of distinguish a behavior that's within what is the considered, the typical, normal, common limits from behavior that's symptomatic. So for children younger than 5 years, the behavior should occur on most days for a period of at least 6 months. For people 5 years or older, the behavior should occur at least once per week for at least 6 months. And so while these frequency criteria provide guidance on kind of a minimal level of frequency to define symptoms, other factors should also be considered, such as whether the frequency and intensity of the behaviors are outside a range that is normative or typical for the person's developmental level, gender, as well as what's typical for the culture that they are in. Next, the disturbance in behavior is associated with distress in the person or others in their immediate social context. So they're causing distress within the family, within their peer group, work colleagues, classmates, or it impacts negatively on social, educational, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. So it's impacting their ability to function in various areas of life. And the behaviors do not occur exclusively during the course of a psychotic, substance use, depressive, or bipolar disorder. So it's not only happening during these other times. So someone could have a major depressive disorder, or they could have bipolar disorder, but that these symptoms aren't only happening during those episodes, that it is happening continuously. And so they can be, right, experiencing these other disorders and, including depression. But it just means that the ODD behaviors aren't only during that depressive episode, or only during that bipolar episode, or only during substance use. And so ODD can vary in severity. So mild symptoms occur only in one setting. So only at home, or only at school, only at work, only with peers. Moderate would be at least 2 settings, severe 3 or more settings. Now, next we're going to talk about causes, risk factors, and prevention. Before we do that, let me just check a few questions. Could it be possible for someone to be diagnosed with ADHD and ODD? And that is possible. So, how young can this be something that is diagnosed? And so we've got that criteria for even younger than 5. All right, so let's talk about causes, risk factors, and prevention. So the exact cause isn't known, but it's believed that a combination of biological, genetic, and environmental factors might play a role. So when it comes to biological, some studies suggest that abnormalities in or injuries to certain areas of the brain can lead to behavior disorders. In addition to that, ODD has been linked to chemicals in our brain called the neurotransmitters. And so neurotransmitters help nerve cells in the brain communicate with each other. And if these chemicals are out of balance or not working properly, messages might not make it through the brain correctly, leading to symptoms. When it comes to genetics, ODD might be inherited. It's important to note that many children and teens with ODD have close family members with mental disorders, including mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and personality disorders. Then we take into consideration environmental factors like chaotic family life, family history of mental disorders or substance abuse, and inconsistent discipline by parents may be contributing factors as well. And then there's 2 different theories, developmental and learned. So for the developmental theory, it suggests that the problems start when children are toddlers. Children and teens with ODD may have had trouble learning to become independent from a parent or other main person to whom they were emotionally attached. And so their behavior may be kind of normal developmental issues that are just lasting beyond the toddler years. Or there's the learned theory. And this suggests that the negative symptoms of ODD are just learned attitudes. They mirror the effects of negative reinforcement methods used by parents or other adults in power. And the use of negative reinforcement increases the child's ODD behaviors. And that's because these behaviors allow the child to get what they want, attention and reaction from their parents or from others. Now, what puts us at a higher risk? Possible factors or risk factors can include temperament. A child who has a temperament that includes difficulty regulating emotions, such as being highly emotionally reactive to situations or having trouble tolerating frustration, could be at a higher risk. Parenting issues. So, child who experiences abuse or neglect, harsh or inconsistent discipline, or a lack of parental supervision may have a higher risk. A child who lives with a parent or family discord, so disruption within the parents or family, having a parent with mental illness or substance use disorders. And oppositional and defiant behaviors can be strengthened and reinforced through attention from peers and then inconsistent discipline from authority figures. And this includes teachers. Now we were asked about, having more than one disorder, so having ODD with other things. And so many people with ODD also have other mental disorders. Some of these we already talked about, depression and anxiety, bipolar disorder, conduct disorder, learning and communication disorders, but the highest one is ADHD, and that's at 40%. So 40% of people with ODD also have ADHD. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so ODD can lead to other problems. Children and teens with it may have trouble at home with their parents and siblings, in school with their teachers, with their classmates, at work with supervisors and other authority figures. They may struggle to make and keep friends and relationships. So we might see poor performance at both school and work. Might see what kind of feels like antisocial behavior, maybe struggling to control their impulses, increased risk of substance use disorder, as well as an increase in likelihood of suicide. So then how do we prevent it? It's tough to prevent things that we don't know the exact cause. So it might not be possible to prevent ODD, but recognizing and acting on symptoms when they first appear can minimize distress to both, the child and the family, and prevent many of the problems that are associated with it. And so again, that's why I said when we were talking about that diagnostic criteria, you don't have to wait until all of the diagnostic criteria is met to start getting some help. That can happen at first sign of symptoms. Now, providing a nurturing, supportive, and consistent home environment with a balance of love and discipline might help reduce symptoms and prevent episodes of defiant behavior. And about 10.2% of all kids will develop ODD, with the condition occurring slightly more commonly in boys, 11%, than girls at 9%. It can be seen in younger kids. So in that diagnostic criteria, right, it was telling us what to look for in kids younger than 5, but typically it's diagnosed around 8 years old. All right, so next we're going to talk about those myths and facts, since there are so many of them. Before we do that, though, let me just check a few questions. So someone said, when I was talking about how we need to see these symptoms with someone other than a sibling, they're wondering why. Because a lot of these behaviors happen between siblings, and it's very common, right? To tease each other, to try to annoy each other, to pick at each other, to, argue and fight. Like it's just very common amongst siblings. And so it isn't a sign of having the disorder if it's only happening with a sibling. Can we find this to be more severe in in kids that have learning disabilities, and that's possible. Anytime we have more than one disorder, they can kind of play off of each other and make things more difficult. What if they're only showing signs at home? Then it would fall under the mild category, right? So if they're only showing in one place, um, then that's under mild. All right, so let's talk about myths and facts. So first myth is going to answer some questions that are in the Q&A. Does this only occur in children? Now, it's most often diagnosed in children and teenagers, or in children, but teenagers and adults can also have it. Now, symptoms of ODD first appear in childhood, but when they aren't diagnosed or treated, then they can persist into teens and into adulthood. Now, adults who have ODD typically show similar symptoms of anger and irritability. They might have difficulty concentrating, a tendency to hold grudges or seek revenge when they feel wronged, and a pattern of trying to control or disobey others. And it's common for adults with ODD to struggle in relationships and experience conflict with people in authority. Conflicts may lead to unemployment or legal concerns. And so some symptoms of ODD in adult at home is always needing to win an argument. This could be if they're at home but live with parents or roommates, spouse. They continue to fight against the man, the authority figures, could be society as a whole. They'll leave their socks on the floor just because they know it's annoying, or those kinds of annoying behaviors. They may have been cited for disorderly conduct by the police or involved in fights at the bar or physical altercations in public. They have a pretty short fuse, quick to get angry. Littlest things will set them off. At work, there might be near constant arguments with a boss or with coworkers, commonly feeling oppressed by the office rules. Purposely engaging in behaviors that are irritating coworkers, like eating smelly foods for lunch. They might have been getting in trouble with human resources for violating company policies. They might be fired for being physically aggressive at work. They might have meltdowns during meetings or annual reviews after receiving constructive criticism. Another myth is that ODD and conduct disorder are the same thing. Now, along with ADHD, conduct disorder is a condition that most commonly occurs with ODD. Having ODD, especially severe, also increases the risk of developing conduct disorder, which affects about 30% of children with ODD. So, oppositional defiant disorder involves irritable, argumentative, and defiant behavior. They may defy or ignore rules or requests from authority figures, but behavior that's violent or outright illegal isn't as common with ODD. Conduct disorder involves repeated violence, illegal activity, or the disregard for others' rights or property. And so when we were just talking about ODD in adults, and there was mention of violence or illegal behavior, there's the possibility of that increasing more in adulthood than ODD with kids, but it also could be an adult that has conduct disorder. Next myth is that ODD is a result of bad parenting. Now, it is associated with absent or neglectful parenting, but children with loving and present parents can also develop the condition, and research hasn't determined a clear cause for ODD, but it's likely to result from more than one parenting style. And some children may be genetically more likely to develop ODD. Other mental health and developmental issues can also contribute. When children first show symptoms of ODD, the way peers and parents respond to these behaviors can affect whether these behaviors get better because the reaction doesn't enforce it or reinforce it, or worse, right? If they behave a certain way and their peers laugh or really seem to like those behaviors, it may reinforce that behavior and make it even worse. Myth is that punishment is the best way to correct the behavior. Now, research has shown that punishing behaviors associated with ODD does not help. In fact, harsh discipline is a risk factor for developing it. Inconsistent, severe punishment often leads to worse behavior. So, experts agree sending children to camps or retreats for problem children is also unhelpful. We want to find the best way to discipline a child with ODD, and that can be challenging. So, strategies for parents of children with ODD include parent management training, which teaches ways to positively respond to and discipline inappropriate and disruptive behaviors. And then last, ODD is impossible to treat. It's actually treatable. More than 65% of children with ODD see their symptoms go away in 3 years or less. So treating children as if they'll never improve can become a pretty self-fulfilling prophecy. Children who are just written off may doubt themselves and believe no one cares, and results, they might not be motivated to work on their behavior, which then just comes worse. When working with a child or young adult who has ODD, patience and compassion are some pretty key factors to it. It's important to show children they're loved and accepted no matter how they act. All right, so next we'll talk about diagnosis and treatment. Let me just check a few questions. Can we see onset around the teen years? It's more unlikely. We're usually seeing it start in younger children. Now, it is possible for a diagnosis to not be made until someone's a little bit older. It could go unnoticed, or maybe they weren't taken in to get a diagnosis. So someone asked if, after 3 years, there's no symptoms, do they still have ODD? And it's going to kind of be dependent on the situation, what's causing the lack of symptoms, and the likelihood of return. But it may be to the point where the person's been without symptoms for such an extended period of time that it is a disorder that they no longer need treatment for. They've learned a lot of the skills that are needed, and they're doing well. All right, so there are no lab tests to specifically diagnose ODD. And if you're going to a medical doctor, which oftentimes, if we're talking about kids, a lot of people will start with a pediatrician. So if you're with a medical doctor, you're going to want to rule out any kind of physical illness that could be causing behaviors. So they might do some blood tests or X-rays or anything that might be needed, so they can rule it out. Might also be looking to see if there's any kind of medication that they're on that side effects of that medication could be resulting in these behaviors. But if the doctor can't find a physical cause for the symptoms, most likely they're then going to refer to a mental health professional, might be a psychiatrist that specifically works with kids and teens for a diagnosis. And so these healthcare professionals are specially trained to diagnose and then treat mental illnesses. So once you're with your mental health professional, whether it's a psychiatrist or another mental health professional, they're going to use specifically designed kind of interview questions as well as assessment tools to evaluate for the disorder. And so they're going to base the diagnosis on reports of the symptoms and observations of the attitudes and behaviors. They'll probably rely on reports from parents, teachers, other adults, report cards, anything that's going to give a pretty broad understanding of what the behavior is like. Then they're going to determine if the symptoms point to ODD as it's described in that DSM-5 TR like we talked about. They're going to see if they're meeting that diagnostic criteria. And sometimes it takes more than, one meeting, one appointment to make this determination. So before the appointment, you're going to want to make a list of signs and symptoms that have been experienced and for how long, any kind of key personal information, anything that could be contributing to the behavior, stressors, transitions, divorces, differences in expectations and parenting styles for someone that's young. We want to bring information on school performances or work performances, any kind of medical information. This could include any diagnosis physically or mental health. Medications, vitamins, herbs, supplements that are being taken and the dosages, and then any questions that you want to ask. It could be things like, do we think that my child has oppositional defiant disorder or another mental disorder? Or you could be asking about yourself, do you think I have this? What do we think is causing these symptoms? Could it be a different cause? Is this temporary or long-lasting? What could be contributing to this? What treatment approach is recommended? Do we need to be screened for another disorder? What changes need to be made to improve the behavior? Do I need to tell my boss, or do we need to tell the child's teacher? So don't hesitate to ask any kind of questions that you have during the appointment. So then treatment for oppositional defiant disorder primarily involves family-based interventions, but it may include other types of therapy and training, not only for the child or teen, but as parents as well. So treatment often lasts several months or longer, and it's important to treat any kind of co-occurring problem, a learning disorder, ADHD, depression, because they can create or worsen ODD symptoms if that's left untreated as well. And so there's a type of therapy, it's called parent-child interaction therapy. And so during this, a therapist coaches parents while they interact with their child. One way of doing this is a therapist sits behind a one-way mirror and using some kind of audio device, maybe a headphones, guides parents through strategies that reinforce the child's positive behavior. Then as a result, parents learn more effective parenting techniques, the quality of the parent-child relationship improves, and problem behaviors start to decrease. There's also individual and then family therapy. So individual therapy may help with learning to manage anger and express feelings in a healthier way. Family therapy can help improve the communication and relationships and help members of the family learn how to work together. Then there's training. So parent training, mental health professional with experience treating ODD will help the parents develop parenting skills that are more consistent, positive, and less frustrating for the parent and child. Some cases, the child may participate in this training as well. So everyone in the family develops shared goals for how to handle problems. Involving other authority figures, such as teachers, in the training may be an important part of treatment. Cognitive problem-solving training, and this type of therapy is aimed at helping the child identify and then change thought patterns that are leading to these behavior problems. Kind of collaborative problem solving in which a parent and the child work together to come up with solutions that work for everyone. This can help improve the ODD-related problems. And then a social skills training. Kids and teens can benefit from this, as oftentimes these behaviors kind of isolate them from their peers, and this way they can learn how to interact more positively and effectively with them. And now medications aren't used for ODD, but they might be prescribed if there's another mental disorder that's going on, like ADHD, anxiety, depression, and these medications can help improve the symptoms of those disorders. But if it's for a child or someone younger, make sure you're discussing, potential risks as well as the benefits of the medications. In general, medications should be started only after kind of an appropriate baseline of symptoms or behaviors has been obtained, so we know where we're starting at. And then in many cases, the stimulant medications used to treat ADHD will improve symptoms of ODD in adults. All right, next we'll talk about coping as well as support. What kind of therapist are we looking for? So we're looking for someone that has experience in treating ODD. Not everyone that is a therapist has training in that, is specializing in it. So you really want someone who genuinely understands this disorder. The treatment that would be common for children and teens when they're having struggles within the family with their parents is going to be different than what we would see with ODD. Kind of like we pointed out, discipline doesn't really work in these types of situations. So you absolutely want to be finding someone who has experience and training in it. So people are asking if ODD can be outgrown. Typically, any kind of mental disorder will get worse without treatment. And so getting treatment at the first signs of any of these symptoms is going to bring the best outcome. What kind of blood tests are doctors doing? It's really going to be more of a kind of general panel of blood tests, just looking for any kind of abnormalities, anything that's out of, the desired range, and then kind of going from there. The blood work is usually kind of a first sign that something might be going on internally with physical health, and so they may go, from there and see, dive a little deeper into it. Someone asked if there can be mild cases of ODD, and so yes, so there's mild, moderate, severe. Mild is behaviors are in only one location, so only home or only school, that kind of thing. Moderate is 2 locations, severe is 3 locations or more. Can someone with ODD go long periods of time without symptoms, or are they pretty consistent? So for that diagnostic criteria, we're seeing it fairly consistently. So under 5, it's nearly every day. Over 5, it's at least once a week. Can a traumatic experience make ODD worse? Now, traumatic experience and increases in stress can really make symptoms of any mental disorder worse. So yes, that is absolutely possible. All right, so let's talk about coping and support. So at home, we can kind of begin chipping away at the problem behaviors by practicing strategies like recognize and praise, model the behavior, picking battles, setting limits, setting up a routine, building in time together, working together, assigning a household chore, being prepared for challenges early on. So let's talk about each of these individually. All right, so first we want to recognize and then praise positive behaviors. So we want to be as specific as possible. Something like, I really like the way you helped pick up your toys tonight. You could even go further, after only being asked one time. And so we're praising the behaviors that we're really looking for, and we're being so specific about it. And so we're providing rewards for positive behavior. And this can be helpful, especially with younger children. And sometimes the reward can simply be the praise and the attention. But other times, little rewards, stickers, and it can be helpful too, kind of having sometimes a chart where we're using stickers that go to a bigger prize like pizza or something like that. Now, we don't want to have to go, you do it well every day for a month, maybe pizza on Friday, and we start at Monday. We're doing kind of small changes and more consistent rewards and the recognizing of the good positive behaviors. Then we want to be modeling the behavior that we want them to have. So we're demonstrating appropriate interactions and modeling socially appropriate behavior. And this can help increase the skills. And sometimes this is taking an inventory of how you are behaving and responding to things and seeing, is there anything I'm doing that may be teaching them to react in ways that are undesirable. Then we want to pick our battles and avoid power struggles. Really, anything can turn into a power struggle if we let it. And so when we're kind of working on making changes to these behaviors, it may be a good time to let some other stuff go. Things that aren't connected to oppositional defiant disorder. Maybe they didn't make their bed perfectly, and it's not about being defiant. They just simply, weren't great at it, and they're trying. At that point, it can become overwhelming when everything someone is doing is considered bad or negative. And so letting some stuff go that really isn't all that important or doesn't carry as much weight while working on these bigger things can be good, as well as, if they're doing their best with the bed and it continually causes a fight, but we're also working on these much, much bigger things, maybe it's a compromise. And so we're not struggling over this, right? Because it can be triggering some of their ODD symptoms when they're doing what they feel is their best and it's still not good enough. So it can be just the praise of, I didn't even have to ask you to make your bed, and you got all your blankets off the floor and all the pillows are on the bed. Great job, right? We've now praised them, and they're going to want to continue to do, right, the making of the bed because it felt good. And then each time we're praising something that got closer to maybe the ideal making of the bed. Oh, I see you got your sheet all the way to the head of the bed this time. That's great. We also want to set up a routine by developing a pretty consistent schedule. And we can ask them to help us depending on age and developmental level, but they can be a part of it. Maybe there's a reason why they want to do homework after dinner instead of before. Be open to hearing why. Maybe their friend, can only play right after school. And you're saying, well, right after school, you've got to do your homework and then you can play after dinner. Well, they're not even available. Maybe we can make that switch. Or maybe that is the reward. Right? Lots of positive behaviors are happening, and that's the reward. Again, it's not a takeaway. That's a punishment. We're adding rewards in. And we set limits by giving clear and effective instructions. And that's something to take a look at too if you are a parent or someone that's setting rules. Am I clear about it? I think as adults, we've all been in a space where either when we were younger and it wasn't obvious what they wanted from us, or even now as adults, sometimes if we're in school, teachers, what they want isn't clear, or our supervisor, or I don't know, you own a house, sometimes the city isn't clear about what they need, a variety of ways, right? And so we're trying to do our best, and then it's still, isn't matching up to maybe the rubric in college. It's so confusing. And so it's making sure that it's not being confusing for the younger ones too. Is what you're looking for consistently changing, and they don't even know what they're supposed to do anymore? So we have to make sure it's clear and that it's the same thing every time, right? If we want shoes put away, then shoes are put away, but where's put away? Closet, by the door. It needs to be consistent. Or if we've given them a chore to do and we tell them when they need to have it done by, we're not angry if they're waiting to the last second to get that done. You gave them a deadline and they're doing it before the deadline. If you wanted it done sooner, then that had to be the instructions. You can't get upset when someone's following what we said. You've got to pay attention. Am I saying what I mean? Because that's what the person has to go off of. And so we want to discuss kind of these limits when everyone's calm, so not in the middle of a disagreement, and then really kind of enforce these reasonable consequences that can go along with that. And so it's not so much about disciplining the bad behaviors, but we're not getting anything extra if we haven't followed these limits. And then make sure you're building in time together by developing a pretty consistent weekly schedule that involves time for you and your child to spend that quality time together. Oftentimes, these behaviors can be fueled by wanting attention. And so getting that attention positively hasn't worked. So behaving negatively and getting even negative attention is better than nothing. So if we start scheduling in positive attention, that can be helpful in reducing the more negative behaviors. Want to work together with our partner, the other parent, the other adults that might be involved. This could include teachers and coaches, or grandparents, or parents that are separated or divorced, or step parents, or aunts, uncles, whoever's involved. It needs to be consistent. So we're working together to make sure it's consistent and it's appropriate. And so we're working as a team to kind of make sure that the response is the same. Having unclear expectations and differences from one person to the next or one house to the next can be triggering of the symptoms and can make the symptoms worse. And then we want to assign a chore that's essential, but if it doesn't get done, you don't have to do it. An example of this would be feeding the dog is important, but if the child doesn't do it, you have to do it. So we're picking something that's important, but no one else has to do it. It can wait until the child does what's assigned to them. And so we want to set them up for success. So we're picking something that's relatively easy to achieve. Making sure the pillow is on the couch. And then we're gradually getting into more important and then more challenging expectations. Again, it has to be very clear, easy to follow instructions, right? So you have to be clear about exactly what you want from them and when it needs to be done and how to do it. Do not pick something that if it doesn't get done, you will have to do. I just taught them that they don't have to do it. So it could be things that maybe bother you. The shoes by the front door being a mess. But if they don't do it, you don't have to. Nothing's getting hurt by that. You just kind of keep kicking them over until it finally gets done. And then be prepared for challenges. It says challenges early on, but challenges might continue throughout kind of the treatment process. But in the beginning, it's going to be even harder. They probably won't be cooperative or appreciate how you've changed your response to their behavior. And so expect behavior possibly to worsen for a little while. But we got to remain consistent, even in increasing challenges. That consistency is what's going to be really key. Oftentimes, inconsistency in discipline or in parenting or in things that are going on at school, whatever, it's that inconsistency oftentimes will be contributing to ODD. And so when we're making some changes, we have to be consistent about it, even when it's hard. But with that perseverance and with that consistency, that initial hard work will pay off with improved behavior and relationships. And it doesn't mean you have to be, it's going to be tough and it takes 6, 8, 10, 12 months before you see any kind of improvement. When you're consistent, you will start to see it semi-quickly. But it will be hard at first. And there might, it's not always a straight line. Sometimes we move a little backwards and then move forwards again, which can be hard, of course. Now, most parents are going to roll their eyes when asked if they're taking care of themselves, but self-care helps you and your child. It demonstrates that things like rest, socializing, eating well are key overall to health and wellness. How we cope with things and how we care for ourselves, it's something that we're role modeling, and if we're not doing it in a healthy way, our younger people are picking that up from us. And then it also allows you to kind of just be your best version of yourself for your child and can help in preventing you responding in an emotional or fatigue state. That's when we become irritable. We become less consistent with the work we're trying to do, and we may snap. And it just kind of, it's not helpful, and sometimes it can set some of that progress back a little. So think small. Regular brief walks, short conversations with a friend, occasional nights out can make a big difference. Get help from trustworthy friends and family, gives them something important to contribute and makes them feel helpful. If you've got people in your life that are like, yeah, if you need anything, just let me know, and you don't know what to say, make a list. Sit down and write a list, and maybe go, throughout the week, notice everything you're doing. Right? You woke up and then you had to get them dressed for school, and then you drove them to school, and then you had to drive to the bank, and then you did, right? And we're just kind of detailing the whole day. And this is the list, right? So on their laundry and making meals and grocery shopping. But it could also be cutting the lawn or just listening. Oftentimes the people in our lives do want to help. They just don't know what would be helpful. And so when someone's like, let me know if there's anything I can do, you just text them the list, you email them the list and say, is there anything on this list that you'd be able to help with? There are people that don't have the time, but have funds and could send you groceries. Or there are people that don't have time or funds to be there physically, but can talk on the phone. Or someone who has the ability to drive the kids to school because they're already doing it. It's just putting it out there. You can find local support groups for yourself. Mental Health America has a variety across the country. Some religious buildings, behavioral health organizations, hospitals sometimes have these types of groups as well. It's usually free and offer support for parents and siblings, extended family members. Sometimes there's a support group for parents, while there's a support group for the child as well. And then make sure you're taking care of your relationships. A high number of parents report that their marriages and significant relationships have suffered or ended as a result of caring for a child with a mental illness. So nurturing these relationships is as important as nurturing your child. Not doing so can create anger and resentment, and in the end could rob the whole family of the very things that bring them strength and joy. All right, before we move on, let's just check a couple questions. What if we think someone's been misdiagnosed? You can go and get another diagnosis. Now you can go and see the same person and say, I'm feeling like this might not be an accurate diagnosis. Can you explain to me why you think this is accurate? And then I would love to explain to you why I think this may be inaccurate. You can also get another opinion from someone else. It is, because there is no test, we can't do a blood test, we can't do an x-ray for mental disorders, misdiagnoses do happen. And someone brought up the difficulty of maybe having multiple children and different expectations, and how that can be difficult. And it is. I'm not going to lie, right? When you've got some, one child or however many that have ODD versus others, and it can be trying to explain it to them, but it can result in resentment between the siblings, and family therapy can be something that's helpful for that, but finding support groups for the sibling can be helpful as well. There are support groups for siblings of children that have mental illnesses, and not just ODD. Lots of mental disorders in children result in a sibling having some difficult feelings. So it's completely appropriate to be trying to get them what they need as well. Now, here's some additional resources, support groups. We'll make sure you get all of this in that email we send out tomorrow. We'll also put some links in the chat for you. And that's going to be the same with these crisis resources. So if you or someone you know are in crisis, these are different numbers that you can contact for some immediate support, help, guidance. Someone's there to listen to what you're going through. And here are upcoming webinars. Just a reminder, tomorrow's Wednesday. Wednesday's double feature day. So earlier in the day, we're going to talk about communication do's and don'ts. Later in the day, dealing with difficult people in the workplace. Now on February 10th, this could be a great one for anyone that wants a bit more information on just kind of discipline in general. You'll be here with Susan, February 10th, creating positive connections in discipline. So it's not about ODD specifically, but about discipline and making those connections, which are really kind of things we talked about today. So if you haven't registered for that, we'll go put the link in the chat for you now, since these two are so closely related. Might be a great follow-up for that. Then if you need any additional resources, head on over to our website, mindspringhealth.org, or you can find us on social media, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Mindspring Info, or on LinkedIn at Mindspring Mental Health Alliance. You can also send us an email at info@mindspringhealth.org. Now, if you missed the frequently asked questions in the beginning, here's what you missed. This has been recorded, and everyone who registered for today's webinar will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording in it. Also in it will be all the resources we talked about today. No slides will be sent out, and CEUs are not provided for community education webinars. What we do provide are certificates of attendance once you've completed that post-webinar survey. My goal is that everyone leaves here feeling like they learned something, and this survey lets me know if we reach that goal. The organizations that are supporting our webinars want to know how the donations are used and what communities are participating. And so the data is randomized, it's confidential, no one's demographic information is being shared. Everyone who registered for today's webinar and joined us during the live session will receive an email from certificates@mindspringhealth.org soon after the webinar ends. Complete the survey within 48 hours to receive your certificate. Now, even if you don't want that certificate of attendance, we'd love for you to complete the survey. Your participation helps us to offer free webinars. Thanks for joining me today, and hopefully I get to see you tomorrow twice.